Good morning. I'm Mark Tucker. I'm the superintendent for Caledonia Central Supervisory Union. Danville is one of the schools that I serve. Danville School provides a great education to the resident students of Danville and to the high school students who tuition in from the choice towns that surround Danville. However, there's a lot of issues with the current building, the structures that need to be addressed, and the school board has been looking at what to do about this challenge, actually for a couple of years now, with some delays imparted because of the COVID pandemic. But now we're at the point where we're getting ready to make a recommendation to the community for how to solve the problems with the Danville school structure. Cam Featherstone Howe is the associate architect for Truex Cullen, the architect that we work with. He's going to take you on a tour through areas of the building that are really problematic and explain to you why these are concerning and why they need to be addressed. At the end of his tour, he's going to give you a brief overview of the options that are on the table for the board to consider. The intent is the board is going to pick one of the three possible options. I'll let Cam explain those to you when he gets there. And then at the end of the video, there's some contact information for myself and for Clayton Cargill, chair of the Danville School Board. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions, ideas, please feel free to reach out to Clayton or myself. There's also an advisory committee that's been formed that will be holding open meetings for anybody who wants to come in and see the school in person, ask questions, make suggestions there. I strongly encourage you, if you're a Danville resident, to take advantage of these meetings when they get scheduled. Now, I turn this over to Cam Featherstone Howe.
So this is an elementary classroom in the Danville school. This portion of the school was built in 1937. Back in those days, the general thinking was that children were like empty vessels that you could pour knowledge into. So you could just line them up in rows, pack them in tight, and the teacher would teach to them and talk at them. And we know now that children learn a lot of different ways. Yes, they learn by listening, but they also learn by reading, and they also learn by doing things hands-on. Rooms this small, built for a 19th century educational model, are not appropriate to have different areas of activity. You can't have a wet play area in here. It's too cramped to have the kind of activities that little kids need to have. You can't just pack them in rows anymore. There's an argument that you never could. But that's not the only issue in this particular part of the building. Also, building was built in 1937, and it's got a 1937 ventilation system. If you look, there's very small ventilation vents. That's why there's a fan in the window here. This is sort of homebrew ventilation for the classroom to keep it comfortable and keep air moving. Besides all the other issues that are prevalent in the school, which we'll see other evidence of, but generally classrooms, they shouldn't be carpeted, and we're dealing with 25, 30-year-old lighting systems that are just really inefficient. That's probably the fastest thing to pay back would just be replace the lights, and the money you'd save would pay for the renovation. So there's a few things that we could correct in this room just by modernizing, but ultimately we can't make this room any bigger, so we have to figure out a good use for it as is. So we're in the auditorium now at Danville High School, and there's kind of two big issues in this space. The first is that these risers and everything, they were built in 1989 as part of the 1989 renovation. This space was originally built in 1956. And the construction in here is wood construction, it's combustible. That's not permitted in a building of this type and size by today's codes. And it's not just this room, but these risers also form part of the corridor beyond. And it really needs to be pulled out and redone. The other big problem is that this room is completely inaccessible for people who have any kind of physical disability. The risers are much too close to the stage. There's no place to even put a wheelchair. This renovation was done in 1989. That's before the Americans with Disabilities Act. And so there were really very minimal requirements for accessibility in those days. Besides those kind of major issues, all the same issues that the rest of the building has related to old lighting, old electrical service, out-of-date heating systems, and all the other problems that go along with having just an old building. Bottom line, we really need to make the space accessible, and it really shouldn't be made out of wood construction. That would have to be addressed in any renovation work that we did. So we're here at the joints between one of the building additions. This used to be an exterior wall. There was a doorway there at one time. What you're seeing here is water damage coming from actually issues on the roof. It's really a building envelope issue. This could be cleaned up. This drywall stuff could be repaired, but unless the roof issues are dealt with, it'll just happen again. So there's a little bit of a deeper renovation that needs to happen to the building envelope in order to really fix this kind of issue. We also happen to be standing right next to a piece of equipment, heating equipment at these exterior doors. Unfortunately, this piece of equipment actually caught on fire. It was extinguished. There was no major issues there, but parts are not available for that piece of equipment anymore because it's too old. It's so old you can't get service parts for it. So it really needs to be replaced. And that's not uncommon when you have old equipment in these buildings. When it's 40, 50 years old, sometimes there are no service parts available. It's typical with electrical and also a lot of mechanical stuff. So it's time to rethink the equipment that goes into the building so that it can be serviced for another 30 years or so. So we're in a pre-K room at the Danville Elementary School, and the biggest issues in this room are, it was built in 1956, and it's much too small to be an adequate pre-K room for today's standards. And pre-kindergarten classrooms have to have different areas where kids can do different activities. They spend all day in this one room, except they go out for recess. And right now, with the size of the room per the state regulations, they can have about 14 kids in this room, and there's a huge wait list in Danville. We would expect pre-kindergarten rooms to be, 150% the size of this room. And they also are required to have a full-size accessible bathroom, which this room does not have. This room has a microscopic bathroom. So in addition to all the other issues that we've talked about before, the old lighting, carpet in a little kid's room, old plumbing. I mean, these things, it's time to fix them up and replace some of this infrastructure. And at the same time, take the opportunity to make these rooms an appropriate size for the activities that are going on in here. So this is the bathroom I was talking about. You can see from the size of the door, this was just built, long before accessibility and people in wheelchairs was really a concern of designers and builders. And the bathroom is very small. Today's standards would require that a bathroom for a pre-K classroom be full size and be fully accessible for a person in a wheelchair. And this clearly is not big enough for that. It really needs to be gutted and rebuilt so that it meets current code. Okay, so here we are. We're in a combination special ed room, special ed office, and OTPT, which stands for Occupational Therapy and Physical Therapy. The biggest issues in this room is that there's too much happening in this room. This should really be multiple separate spaces, and they should be larger than they are. You can tell if you look around that it's very cramped, and there's too many activities happening at once. At least the OTPT room should have a space for people to do their physical therapy, but also space to store all the equipment that they have related to that, not stored out in the open, with wheelchairs jammed up with tricycles and stuff like that. Similar problems that we've seen elsewhere: tiny bathrooms that are inaccessible, plumbing sinks that are totally inaccessible, carpet in classrooms, old lighting. It's the same old story. So this is another piece of evidence in, why the building is just not functioning for today's standards. So in any kind of new design or redesign, we would want to separate these spaces and give these functions their own space so that they're not competing. So we're in a French room or a foreign language room in Danville High School. Again, it's similar to some other areas where the biggest issue is space. They'll put a full class of kids in here to learn French or Spanish, and the room is half the size it should be, if that. Another big problem with this space and a few of the others in this hallway is there's no windows in these classrooms. So there's no access to fresh air or daylight, which are really important for human health. And of course, the kids are kind of lucky here. They get to go to different rooms. They come here for one period, then they go to a different room, but someone's got to sit in here and teach all day. And we really shouldn't have classrooms in the 21st century in the United States that don't have windows in them. So it's just a relic of an older time when people did not put the same kind of emphasis or care on issues of human health related to daylight or fresh air. And so this is one that really has to be fixed. We couldn't renovate this building and not address issues of daylight or fresh air. And this room is much too small for what it is. It's just, again, speaks to the space crunch here at Danville and the need for more classroom space. So we're in a science lab in Danville High School, and there's a couple of issues in this space. This is one of the newer spaces in the building, built in 1989. And again, it was built before the Americans with Disabilities Act in 1991. And so right now in this science lab, there are currently no accessible stations for experiments to be run at. So it's very difficult for a person with a physical disability to participate. There are also some storage issues because there's a lot of materials needed to run a high school science program, and right now there's just not enough storage places for all the pieces and parts that are needed to actually run the program. So aside from sort of the other issues that we've talked about ad nauseum, carpet in a science lab doesn't make a heck of a lot of sense. Old lighting, fluorescent should be replaced with LEDs. Overall, the size of the space isn't bad, and it can be rehabilitated, but it's definitely time, particularly with the lack of accessibility. Hey, so we're in the wood metal shop at Danville High School. The biggest issues in this area are that it's really competing space with different programs. We've got a wood metal shop, welding area, pottery studio, and maintenance bay, all in one space, which you can imagine makes it difficult to conduct a classroom or to do necessary maintenance because there's going to be competing interests and potentially kids trying to learn. Besides that, it's, this part of the building was built in the 60s. It was built for a different era of trade worker. People nowadays, they're not running lathes and drill presses at the machine shops. They're running CNC milling machines, and they're running computerized equipment. They're in the process of modernizing the program here, but really what's needed is for new spaces to get the maintenance folks out of here, have a proper pottery studio as part of the art program, and let the space be modernized for 21st century trade work so that we can get some more folks out into the trades so that we can get more of these buildings fixed up. Everyone's heard about the shortage of trade workers in Vermont, and part of fixing that problem is fixing these spaces and modernizing them for the 21st century. So we're outside now of the Danville School looking at the soccer field and baseball diamond. There's a few options for how to renovate and expand the school to meet the existing program. The first option involves building a significant elementary school addition to the west, where the playgrounds are now, and developing the rest of the site for parking and drop-off. The second option, which we think will save some money potentially, involves a more focused and condensed addition in the footprint of the old building, within the footprint of the old building. The third option, which estimators think is potentially not very much more money, is to demolish the old school and build a new one. If they were to go that route in this community, it would involve first building the new school where the soccer field is now, and then once that school is complete the kids would, go home for a summer, come back and move into the new school, and then you could take down the old school and build a new soccer athletic field and parking area where that is. So that's what we are calling option 3. But all of these options are available on the Danville School Board website, and we're happy to answer any questions that folks have about them. Moving forward, the Danville community is going to have to make a decision about how they want to move forward with their school facilities and what path to take. So those are some of the options that are out there, and we're just excited to help the Danville community determine the next steps for their school.